The following program is a sports handicapping show. That's right, we will be discussing sports betting and all kinds of other gambling stuff, including game predictions. As you know, not every bet will win, but we do our best. Feel free to use this information at your own risk, and remember, wager wisely, folks.
Broadcasting from the Vegas Video Network studios, live from the Las Vegas Strip, Covers.com presents Vegas SportsDay. And now from the sports betting capital of the world, here are your hosts, Teddy and the Professor.
It's Monday in beautiful, sunny Las Vegas, Nevada, and you are watching Vegas SportsDay, the pulse of the sports betting world. I'm your host, Teddy Covers, joined as always by my esteemed colleague, the Professor, Dave Malinsky.
Coming up today, there's been a red carpet of Roll Tide money coming across the counters here in Las Vegas, to the surprise of the books who didn't expect it. We're going to tell you at the end of today's show whether or not that money is going to be right, how a college basketball team has a good chance to win tonight if they have a senior moment, and could Teddy really have been the Pope of Greenwich Village? Don't worry, guys. When we get to money time, he'll still have his thumbs.
Yeah. Great intro, Dave. And let's start with the first take for a Monday morning. Lots happened this past weekend. What'd you see that you want to share with our viewing audience?
Let's go back to last week's show. And we talked about the changing flow of the NFL this year. More points, more yards passing, and how we could isolate that to the fact that defenses have literally been castrated. That's probably the best word to use. When you had a chance to sit down and watch the playoff games in isolation, instead of the usual Sunday when we're scrolling around the dials, getting bits and pieces and snippets of so many different ones, look at how many penalties were flagged on quarterbacks being hit, receivers being hit, that wouldn't have been called 2 years ago. It was staggering to see. And a lot of these calls we disagree with. And there are many settings where there's just not much the defender can do but make the plays that they're making, and they're getting flagged anyway. So when we get to Market Watch, we're going to talk about the points that were scored. And we have to not only incorporate the regular season NFL thinking, but that notion in January that defense wins championships. No, we got to be a little more careful with that as we break these games down. So yeah, it was interesting to watch the games in isolation, see those plays and realize, you know what, the sport that we've been handicapping for 3 decades probably has changed forever. We need to change also. Teddy, what did you bring in on this Monday morning?
Tebow! Oh, man, we had a blast yesterday. I went down to the M. I was doing the live in-game wagering at one of the local casinos, Cantor Gaming, of course, who's been really the forerunner, the market leader when it comes to in-game wagering here in Las Vegas. And the whole game I was just betting Denver money line, Denver money line, Denver money line. And there it comes down to overtime, first play of the OT. You guys know what happened. You've seen the highlights already. But it's something that we talked about on the show last Friday. And Dave, you in particular were adamant that the absence of Ryan Clark for Pittsburgh, the Steelers' leading tackler, was as impactful an injury as there was in this ballgame. And Ryan Clark on the game-winning touchdown pass to Demaryius Thomas, he would have made that tackle. He would have made that tackle. In that play, this show and what we talk about came to fruition. Was a lot of fun. We made a lot of money yesterday. Now, we got to put that in the rearview mirror and do it again this week. So let's shift over to Market Watch right now and throw out the opening numbers for next weekend's NFL playoff games. If you haven't seen them yet, this is what the market has done over the course of the last 24 hours. Saturday's games, we're going to start in San Francisco. The New Orleans Saints, a 3.5-point road favorite at San Fran, and total 47.5. Clearly a total that reflects the Saints' mentality, not what Jim Harbaugh and the 49ers are trying to do. The late game on Saturday night, Tebow and company traveled to New England, take on the Patriots. That game's been bet down from 14 to 13.5. Total there, 51. On Sunday, the opener, Baltimore at home against Houston. The Ravens, anywhere between a 7.5 and a 9-point home favorite against the Texans. Total in that game, 35.5, by far the lowest total game of the upcoming weekend. And the late game on Sunday, the Giants travel to Green Bay. That game's bouncing between 8 and 9 right now. Total 52.5.
Let's talk about something that, you're at the M yesterday.
Yeah.
You got the Broncos.
Yeah.
We both had the Broncos in our pockets. But how about this feeling that for the first time, that +8 when you go to overtime isn't guaranteed anymore?
I know.
How does that feel?
Well, honestly, I wasn't that worried about it. I really thought that Denver was going to find a way to win that game, even after blowing the lead in regulation. It just had that feel the whole game. When you're just confident, you're watching a game, and maybe things are breaking your way, and then they're not for a while, but you just have that calm sense, relaxed, it's going to work out. I felt that way. And even with the new OT rules that allow a team to lose by, in theory, as many as 14 points in overtime. You score the touchdown, you go for 2, which no one would ever do. But and then, of course, you have a pick 6 the other way. You could lose by 14 in OT, just like you can in college in the overtimes. But the stress level wasn't there, Dave. I felt pretty good about that wager, although the new overtime rules, they had the potential to offer some intriguing circumstances. But given that it was a one-play overtime session, the intrigue simply wasn't there.
Oh, I should clear one thing up so that going forward, you can't have a win by 14. You can have a win by 9. Because if the team that gets to the first possession gets a touchdown,
Yes.
then it ends. Our fear yesterday, Pittsburgh wins the toss, gets a field goal. Now here comes the pick 6. Here's where it could get away from you. So that old notion that you take 6.5 in the regular season, and when a game goes to overtime, you change the channel. No, still alive. Our key was Denver winning the coin toss, which took that sequence away of Pittsburgh getting a 3 and a pick 6 or a fumble being run back in. But the bet was not automatic the way that it once would have been.
So last week in a post-mortem, we talked about how the NFL has changed so dramatically over the course of the past few seasons, and this year more than ever. The passing game made even more difficult to stop by the new rules in place. That was absolutely evident throughout Wild Card Weekend. What did we see? Well, the projected totals over the last 3 years, the closing totals for the games, for the 4 Wild Card Weekend games over the last 3 years, average of 169.5. This year, 178.5 for the 4 closing totals. So that's an average of about a 2.5-point increase per game. Now, the actual scores in regulation this year, 186 points. We saw 3 of the 4 games fly over the closing totals. 5 of the 8 teams reached at least 400 yards of total offense. 4 of the 8 teams averaged at least 6.9 yards per play. The home teams, 4-0 straight up, 4-0 against the spread in the wild card round, in contrast to what we had seen the previous season. And all 4 winners, straight up and against the spread, had a yards per pass differential of plus 1.4 yards per pass or better. It's a passing league right now. Bettors need to be aware.
So this is where the fun's going to begin as we break the games down this week. Now, we'll talk about this week's games a lot over the course of the week ahead. On Thursday, we'll do both of the Saturday games. On Friday, we'll do both of the Sunday games. But now here come these conundrums again. Yes, we know it's a passing league. We know that now Aaron Rodgers and Tom Brady are going to go out and take the field with home field advantages. But boy, when we look at the flip side of these equations, we've got some awfully weak defenses laying big wood out there. New England, that 13.5, possibly 14 against Denver. The bottom defense in the AFC. Green Bay, favored by more than a full touchdown over the Giants. The bottom defense in the NFC this year. A lot of food for thought as we break these games down over the course of this week.
We've been getting great questions in via email, and we're going to answer as many as we can on a daily basis on this show. Please keep those emails coming. Remember, this is your show. Comments, questions, suggestions, criticisms, whatever you got, send it in. SportsDay@covers.com is that email address. Again, SportsDay@covers.com. You can follow us on Twitter @VegasSportsDay. And, of course, no reason you shouldn't be getting involved in the community. Active threads and discussions going on right now with like-minded people like yourself who love sports and sports betting. Just go to covers.com/posting forum.
When we come back, is Teddy going to break into a Frank Sinatra rendition of A Summer Wind?
Please, no.
Maybe not that, but we're going to talk about the new pope in the metropolitan area that we can make some money off of. You're watching Vegas Sports Day.
Are you looking for the latest odds, the fastest scores, the most important trends, and the best matchups and stats? Are you looking for the key late-breaking information that can make you a winner? Well, Covers.com has the answer. The world's largest sports betting community gives you a front row seat in the heart of the action, from the opening lines to the final scores. If you want to stay ahead of the game, Covers covers the numbers.
No pressure. Hi, I'm Dennis Silvers from, can't think of the name of my damn show. Golf and other four-letter words, and you're watching the Vegas Video Network, I think.
Okay, guys, time to scrub up. It's time for the post-mortem. We're going to take you deep inside the operating room to show you those things you should have seen, but probably didn't.
You know, we've been on the air for almost 3 months now. And yeah, we've heard your comments about some of our cultural references skewing a little bit old. But they don't. They don't skew old. They skew quality. The best stuff stands the test of time. So if we're going to be focusing on Herb Pope and Seton Hall, of course we have to cross the river and use a reference from a movie. Yeah, it's 30 years old, but it's a timeless classic, The Pope of Greenwich Village. For those of you who like Mickey Rourke in The Wrestler, this might be the movie that made him a star. Well, he was a star already. It was a great movie. And if you haven't seen it, and you like 30-year-old movies, this is one, it's a good movie, bottom line. So, who better to talk about it than me? I spent some time living in New York City, in the East Village. I didn't live in Greenwich Village, I lived in the East Village. But it's a fun place to be, no question about it. And there's lots going on. Enough with the cultural stuff, Dave. Can't talk about my history, my sordid past. Let's talk about basketball. What do you got for us? Herb Pope and Seton Hall.
Sordid past? Yeah, some new elements, coming into play here.
No details.
Definitely some new elements coming into play. Last Tuesday on this show, we cashed an easy play of the day on Seton Hall as a home underdog against Connecticut. If you watched the game, it didn't look like an upset. It looked like Seton Hall was just simply the better team. There's a reason for that. They were. You could have followed right up again with Seton Hall on the road against Providence Saturday night. Let down off the Connecticut win? No, they went on and did what they do. They grinded. One of the prime reasons, we talked last Tuesday about having seniors at the two key spots on the court. Your number 5, that pivot position, and your number 1, the point guard. That's very rare in the big-time college conferences these days where kids just don't stick around that long. Herb Pope, the center for Seton Hall, averaging a double-double this year. Now, he's only been with the Hall for 3 years. He started his first year at New Mexico State. But even 3 consecutive years with a program is a lot. Jordan Theodore, the point guard, not only scoring, Theodore averaging 16.9, but look at this distribution, 118 assists versus 40 turnovers. That's against a pretty tough schedule. You know what you have when you've got seniors in those key spots in the Big East? You got guys almost the equivalent of being like second-year NBA players because you're through a grinder in that conference. That's why we think Seton Hall is still far off of the radar screen. Physical play permeates the Big East. And we'll talk about that a little bit when we get to West Virginia, Connecticut in money time today. Who better to get it done at the end of close physical games than people like Pope and Theodore? Yeah, not sexy the way they're winning their games. They're playing awfully scrappy defense. Willard, a terrific defensive coach, a Rick Pitino disciple, doing a great job of pressuring the basketball. But while there's no sex appeal out there for Seton Hall, you put him in a close game with 2 minutes left. And if you've got a big guy inside you can go to who's going to clear the boards, and if you've got a senior point guard who can handle those key settings, you're going to win some games and you're going to cash some tickets. Now let's move over to the NBA, where we thought that Joe Johnson and the Atlanta Hawks might have been set up for one of the clunkers of this or any season on Saturday night. Take a look at the way this schedule laid out. 9 games in 12 days. 5 games in 6 days. 3 games in 3 days, and the previous 2 played out to a total of 4 overtime periods. We had wondered what was going to happen with this new season, with some of these awkward schedule setups. So this might have been as bad as any that we had ever seen. And look at the minutes going into that matchup based on the overtimes of the 2 previous games. Joe Johnson, 92 minutes, 11 seconds. Jeff Teague, 87-27. Josh Smith, 82-11. Al Horford, 82-46. So not only are you playing your 3rd game in 3 nights with court changes, off of 2 overtimes, all of your key cogs had logged the biggest back-to-back totals they'd ever logged in their careers. An absolute recipe for disaster, isn't it?
No. Instead, Atlanta probably played their best game of the season, certainly their best game since their opening night 36-point blowout over New Jersey. Wire to wire for the Hawks in a brutal scheduling spot. It was 63-45 at halftime. They shot 56.6% from the floor against what may be the NBA's best defense. They had 32 assists on 47 field goals, and they had 16 steals, leading to 27 fast break points. That's good basketball, however you want to describe it. But the plus-minus numbers tell us even more about that. Dave just went through the minutes that the key starters for Atlanta had played. What happened with the plus-minus factors? Because we saw the Bulls reserves have some success against the Hawks in the fourth quarter. But with the starters on the floor, Joe Johnson, plus 35 while he was on the floor. Al Horford, plus 29. Jeff Teague, plus 27. Josh Smith, plus 26. And they did this despite the fact that the fifth starter, Marvin Williams, got hurt in the first quarter and never returned to the floor. He's not going to play in tonight's game either. At least doesn't look like the way. We'll talk about New Jersey, Atlanta in money time later. They outscored Chicago by more than a point per minute while Johnson and Horford were on the floor. And the starters combined 31 of 47 from the floor, 4 of 4 from three-point range. Here's a quote from Josh Smith. Quote, "That's what it's all about, playing together as a team. Whenever we are that unselfish on the offensive end, guys are more willing to make that extra push on the defensive end." Could it be that a heavier workload of games might actually help some teams play better, to get into a better rhythm? Or was it the fact that Atlanta had a little bit of a chip on their shoulder for the way they blew that lead against Chicago earlier in the week that gave them a revenge motif and allowed them to have that extra energy playing in a very, very difficult spot? It's a tricky question, and it's a tough question, but it's a question we're going to have to answer. In fact, we're going to have to answer it rather quickly.
That's right. When we come back, the Hawks take the court again. So we'll talk about what that sequence over the weekend meant. It's going to be money time coming up. You're watching Vegas Sports Day.
Hi, I'm Chris Phillips from Talk Tales, and you're watching the Vegas Video Network. And if you stop by the studio, our producer Scott's going to buy everybody a drink.
Livestream is your premier place to watch live events on the web, mobile devices, and connected TVs. See new events daily or broadcast your own at livestream.com. Livestream. Be there.
Okay, guys, it's money time with no thumbs. This edition of Money Time is brought to you by Covers.com. Remember, for all the key information you need in every sport, Covers covers the numbers. Let's go to Newark, New Jersey, with the Atlanta Hawks about minus 5.5 point favorites on the road against New Jersey. This is the third meeting between these two teams already this year. Atlanta blew them out on opening night. I talked about it before, 106-70 in New Jersey. And then they also beat the Nets 105-98 on their own home floor, but didn't cover the numbers. The road team has covered each of the first two meetings. Now the Hawks, they've had a day off since that brutal scheduling stretch. Is this a spot where we're going to see Atlanta's best, in which case the Nets probably up against it? Or is this a spot where we're going to see the Hawks perhaps lay a bit of an egg, that egg that we thought they were going to lay on Saturday against Chicago? What do you say, Dave?
So the psychological focus comes into play. Because for as good as Atlanta played on Saturday, and of course we're trying to say it looks even better because you were up against Chicago, a lot of that was because they were playing Chicago. If you remember back earlier in the week, Atlanta had a big lead, saw it get away in the fourth quarter, so they had a chip on their shoulder. They had a real reason to get excited. As you know, when you follow the NBA over the course of the long grind, it's how much focus or motivation a team can bring to the court on a given night. Chicago put a chip on their shoulder, New Jersey doesn't. You've handled New Jersey easily twice already. Do you get yourself back up to that same focus point? It's going to be awfully difficult for Atlanta tonight. This is where we could see that crash set in, also because you didn't have a practice yesterday, wanted to let the guys finally rest after that 3-3 cycle, maybe as tough as any 3-3 that we're going to chart all year. Maybe this is where it happens. But now here's the conundrum. Is New Jersey good enough to trust?
Well, Dave, you're talking about castration. You're talking about conundrums. Let's keep it real simple here. You know, there's no conundrums about castration on this show whatsoever. It's about the Nets and the Hawks. And the bottom line for New Jersey, they're struggling, offensively in particular. And there's no surprise. This was an offense, supposed to be an inside-out offense with Darren Williams and Brook Lopez. But Lopez got hurt before the season started. Mehmet Okur, who they acquired from Utah in a preseason trade, he's not the same interior force. He's a big guy who likes to jack up three-pointers from the perimeter, and he's very good at doing that, but it's not the flow that Avery Johnson and company were looking to have with New Jersey. And that's why right now they rank number 28 in the NBA in offense. And frankly, if you're trying to think of the two teams that are worse than the Nets, it'd be hard to think of because the Nets are really bad. One thing in New Jersey's favor right now, they didn't have a chance to practice at all from the end of training camp through their first 6 games. They had a practice last Thursday, and boom, the next night they went to Toronto and pulled off the outright upset. They weren't able to follow that up in a game against Miami over the weekend, but they had another chance to practice yesterday, so at least we're seeing some opportunity for the Nets to get a little bit better on the floor in what may be an ugly spot for the Hawks.
Let's go to Storrs, Connecticut, where the Huskies, a 5.5-point favorite over West Virginia. Some people say the defending national champions. Hard to say that because when Kemba Walker left, that wasn't the same team anymore. Real chip on the Connecticut shoulder tonight off of 2 awful performances on their New Jersey swing last week. They lost to Seton Hall and Rutgers by a combined 19 points, and it was an offensive meltdown. They only shot 36.4% in those 2 defeats, 33 turnovers, only 24 assists. Yet despite that, the money this morning coming to Connecticut. That 5.5, even some 6 were showing in a few places. So the markets are saying, this is Jim Calhoun, this is the Connecticut program, a lot of carryover guys that won a championship last year. This is a bounce-back setting for them, right? Well, maybe this Connecticut team has problems that run a little bit deeper.
Yeah, and if you've watched Kemba Walker play for the Bobcats, he's been impressive coming off the bench, having an impact already at the NBA level. Not every game, but we've seen him at least 3 or 4 times. I've seen Kemba Walker come off the bench this year and provide a nice spark for Charlotte, not for the UConn Huskies. The UConn Huskies have some clear issues right now. Here's a quote from Jim Calhoun that speaks volumes about what's going on behind the scenes for a team that starts 4 underclassmen among their 5 starters. Quote, Calhoun, we struggled at times last year, but we never struggled like this. This is a different kind of struggle. We're struggling to give our best effort. Now here's a quote from the point guard, Shabazz Napier, sophomore, who's trying to be the leader on this team. Quote, I'm trying to be a good leader out there. Sometimes guys give me the chance, sometimes they don't. I do take it personal. When I yell, kick it out, and Jeremy or Boatwright still puts up a shot, it means I'm not a good leader. Calhoun's response to that quote, he said, there isn't a lack of leadership. We have none. That's going to be an issue for UConn moving forward.
So Connecticut doesn't necessarily bounce back tonight because some of these issues you don't fix. West Virginia's the type of team we like as a road dog because now here come some of these Seton Hall elements again. 2 big seniors. First, is anyone playing better than Kevin Jones anywhere in the nation right now? 7 double-doubles in his last 8 games. Darryl Bryant, another senior on the perimeter, scores at least 25 points 3 times in the last 4 games. Here are those hardened, toughened guys that help the rest of the squad play with poise, play with maturity. You're not going to out-physical a Bob Huggins team. If there's going to be an issue with West Virginia, it's going to come later. We talked about Jones having those double-double 6 times in the last 7 games. Those last 7 games, he played 280 minutes. 40 minutes a game. Now, it doesn't mean every minute of every game they had a couple of overtimes, but that's a big workload. Bryant, same span, 278 minutes. At some point, that's likely to catch up to them, but maybe not this early in the Big East season.
Well, let's go to Stillwater, Oklahoma, where tonight the Sooners about a 2.5-point favorite against, the Cowboys about a 2.5-point favorite over the Sooners in Stillwater this evening. And this is another one of the TV games for tonight. And Lon Kruger, the Oklahoma coach, coached here in Las Vegas for the Runnin' Rebels for a number of years before he took this gig. And from day one here in Vegas, Kruger's Rebels played defense. They played great defense year in, year out. And that wasn't something that took 3 years for him to get a system into place. The first year he was on the job, the running Rebels, they didn't run and they didn't rebel. They played tough D. We're already seeing signs that this year's Oklahoma team is going to be a stellar defensive ball club.
Flip side of this equation, and it's one that we might as well bring this up because if you remember a couple of weeks ago, right up this little dark side of college basketball, we saw Temple go to Texas on a Saturday afternoon, absolutely get hosed. And we can be strong with the language on that one. If you review the film, Temple wasn't given a fair chance to win that basketball game. We talked about the problem sitting in here of the Longhorn Network and why that means an awful lot of money to ESPN, not just for that network itself, but when Texas does play games anywhere on what they call the ESPN family of channels. Texas got the preferred nation status in that game. Temple doesn't get on ESPN. They're not, the Atlantic 10 isn't cut in for a part of that pie. So we said, okay, guys, don't worry about that. That may happen in the non-conference. It won't happen when Big 12 play starts. So what happens on Saturday? Well, now Travis Ford and Oklahoma State, they go to Texas, and they feel that they got hosed. We'll give you Ford's take on it first, and then we'll get to the numbers. Here's his take. Our team, Oklahoma State, was in foul trouble all night long. That's what happened. They played pretty aggressive defense on us, but we had a tough time getting into a flow because every time we turned around, they were calling a foul on us. I'm anxious to go back and watch the film. How many fouls were called? Here's something you don't see very often. They had more fouls and turnovers than they had shot attempts in that game. 29 fouls called against Oklahoma State, only 17 against Texas. Texas wins 17-5 at the free throw line. That's more than they won the game by. And oh, by the way, this game was still tied 42-42 with 7:44 to play. We're learning a couple of things. One, Oklahoma State patching things together after a couple of key personnel losses. They're going to be a bit inconsistent. Two, we got to be real careful bucking Texas right now. There might be bigger things at stake than we necessarily feel more comfortable talking about.
And let me go back to the Oklahoma side of the equation for just a moment. There were a couple of quotes I wanted to get out here. The Sooners played Kansas over the weekend, and hustle wasn't a problem. 34-34 on the boards. They had 15 offensive rebounds, but they did struggle with turnovers. 17 turnovers led to a number of easy transition buckets. And they played some 1-2-2 zone in that game, which they hadn't played yet this year. Kruger's quote, "We need to play some zone." Wasn't bad for more than we played it. We did some things that helped us. Here's a quote from Bill Self, the Jayhawks head coach, following that game. Quote, "I think OU is really good defensively. We got some easy baskets. We didn't shoot the ball great against them if you take away layups. We got some easy baskets, which helped a lot, but I think they're good defensively." We've seen this total get bet up so far this morning. We're looking at 131, 131.5 out there right now from an opener of 128. I'm not so sure I agree with that move.
When we come back, looks like there's a college football game in New Orleans tonight.
What?
Yeah, if there is, we might as well talk about it. And some real fun for you guys. We got opposite sides from the hosts here. So when Money Time continues, I'll explain why I'm right and why Teddy's wrong. You're watching Vegas Sports Day.
Traditional media believes that after about 3 minutes, you'll tune out. Most Vegas media companies think if it doesn't jiggle, you won't tune in. At the Vegas Video Network, we think both are wrong. The Vegas Video Network is the first and only live online broadcast network that specializes in insider news and expert views about Vegas. We combine great storytelling with the ability to watch when and where you want on your computer, mobile device, or television. Discover the real Las Vegas. Visit VegasVideoNetwork.com.
Let's go to the Superdome in New Orleans, where right now we're looking at Alabama, about a 2.5-point favorite and taking heavy money so far today. Total 41. That total the over has seen some money today as well. So the late money coming on Bama and over so far, Dave. And I know this is probably going to be a disappointment to some of you viewers, but I've got absolutely nothing for you on the side for this ballgame. Nothing. Zilch. I won't have a dollar bet on Bama or LSU on the side tonight. Here's why. For me, it's a fairly simple thought process. LSU deserves to be the number one team in the country. They beat everyone that stood in their path. They were able to beat Alabama in Tuscaloosa early in the year. They've been undervalued by the betting markets throughout the course of the year. They've been point spread monsters in many ways, like Auburn was last year. And while the stats aren't always that impressive with LSU, particularly on the offensive side of the football, they have been able to find ways to score and beating teams by margin consistently. I'm not going to sell them short. I'm not willing to bet against LSU as a dog. At the same time, Nick Saban, same season revenge, extra time to prepare, and Alabama, probably a point or two higher in my power ratings than LSU. You can see why Bama's favored. You can see why I'm not in any rush to bet against that circumstance. And, of course, Alabama wins the first meeting if one of their two kickers can hit a field goal. Remember, they missed 4 field goal attempts in that contest. So, sidewise, I honestly don't know a lot of people that do have a very strong opinion here. This game likely to be close, likely to be competitive, and likely to be decided by who's going to make the crucial mistake at the wrong time. And from a capping perspective, I don't know which teams that's going to be. What about you, Dave? You got a strong opinion on the side here?
We really don't have anything but. If this money continues to flow the way it's flowing and you get a chance to take a 3, then your decision's made for you.
Yep.
If you've got two teams that are this close and a game that's going to be this fiercely competitive and a game that some of us believe is going to be this low scoring, then that 3 could stand up awfully big. So now here's where we're going to have some fun. A little bit of disagreement on the total. So let's go to work with it. Here's what they're projecting right now. About a 21.5 to 19 Alabama win, right in that range. Doesn't sound like a whole lot, but look at what it means with these defenses. Not only the 2 best in the nation, but maybe the 2 best we've seen in a couple of years. Alabama going to give up 19 points. They didn't do that in a line game all year. Someone going to score more than 21 on LSU? Oregon did that in the opener. That was it. No one else got there. And keep in mind that these are teams that have played awfully good schedules. Of the 25 games they've played, 11 were against teams that have already won bowl games. And, of course, that doesn't count the game against each other. So half of their opponents are teams that went on to win bowls. In those 25 games, the defense has allowed 22 touchdowns. So here's what that 41 means to us. These are defenses that get up less than 1 touchdown per game. You've got to have at least 5 if you're going to go over a 41 today. 4 is not going to get you there. 4 touchdowns and 4 field goals, that only gets you to 40. So it's going to be at least 5 touchdowns. At 5 touchdowns and 2 field goals, you're still sliding away with a push. So we don't know where the touchdowns come from against these defenses, but Teddy thinks he does.
Yeah, well, look, first of all, let's go back to that concept of the 2.5 here that we're seeing right now in all the Alabama money. I don't think we're going to see 3s. A book is going to have to be absolutely desperate to draw some LSU money to throw a 3 out there because they could get sided there. As soon as the 3 shows, the wise guy is going to pop it. No question about it. And then the game lands on 3. They push one side, lose the other side. It's a disaster recipe for the sports books. I think it's much more likely that if the flow of Crimson Tide money continues over the course of the next, 6 hours or so, that we'll see 2.5 with juice, 2.5 minus 120, as opposed to any book moving to 3. It's just a recipe for disaster. And a sportsbook director doesn't want to have to get called up to the GM's office. Here in Vegas, that's a nightmare meeting. Nobody wants to go do it. It's not going to happen. I think if we see a 3, I'd love to have LSU plus 3. I'd love to have Bama plus 3. Doesn't matter. But I don't think we're going to see that number. Now, to explain why Dave is wrong here, he's concentrating on these defenses and all the defensive success these two teams have had. Well, guess what? Part of the defensive success is that these teams, both of them, are more than capable of scoring in all 3 phases of the game. The offenses score points. And I'm going to run through some point totals here. Let's see. Bama, 42, 45, 24, 37, 52, 34, 38, 38, 42. That's their last 9 games not against LSU. They're putting up points. LSU, they scored 42 points in the SEC championship game against Georgia, and they had 30 yards of passing in that game. Those are the type of elite athletes that LSU has on defense, on special teams, guys that can create plays and create big play touchdowns. We didn't see any of that in the first meeting. The first meeting was like, they spent 3 quarters feeling each other out, and by the 4th quarter, they were all paranoid they were going to make a mistake. It was a very conservative game plan, a very slow-paced game. National championship, there's more on the line, and I don't think we're going to see that same game plan again. I gave Alabama scores. What about LSU? 42, 41, 53, 42, 45, 38, 41, 35. You look at the recent meetings between these two teams, and again, yes, Alabama and LSU both have great defenses this year. Guess what? They both had great defenses last year, and the year before, and the year before that, and the year before that. We're talking about between them, 3 of the last 5 national titles. They've had great defenses before, and yet the meetings, 21-24, bang, that goes over this total. Didn't go over that total because it was lined at 45.5, but this total at 40, 40.5, 41, that goes up and over. 27-21. Again, these two teams get 21 all, you cash your ticket, no problem. 41-34, 28-14. These are recent meetings between these same two teams with these same two coaches and these same two quality defenses that have all found ways to get up and over. All we've seen this bowl season, high-scoring games, bad tackling from defenses that have been sitting around for the last 6 weeks. Well, these two defenses were very good in the regular season, but guess what? They've been sitting around for the last 6 weeks. That's not going to help them tackle as well as they did in the first meeting.
Key, of course, is the number of tackles that they have to make. And that's the real hidden element here. It's the pacing. These teams play as slow as any teams do in Division I. Their head-to-head game earlier this year, the lowest game in a BCS conference all season in terms of offensive snaps run. You look at the Alabama games this year, and the LSU games, 13-25 had 120 snaps or fewer. They play slow. Neither one wants to push the pace on offense. But here's why we don't fear the defensive scores as much. And ordinarily, we do when a total is this low because the athleticism is great. The defense has to get the ball in order to be able to score. What these teams do so well offensively is they don't give the ball up. LSU, masterful this year. 8 turnovers in 826 snaps. That's as good a ratio as you will ever see in college football. Alabama, 12 turnovers in 796 snaps. Reason they do that, they're going to go very conservative because they know their own defense can make the stops, so you're not going to run risky plays. What do you do tonight? It's kind of the same thing. You don't run risky plays because you don't want to give anything away. Now, if we do have a weakness, that's how Alabama lost the first game. They were too conservative. They didn't attack when they had the chance to. Now, a lot of people are talking about those field goals that they missed. Keep in mind, and maybe this is very important for our purposes, those field goals that were missed, 44, 50, 49, and 52 yards. 3 of those 4 kicks were under a 50-50 proposition. In fact, the kicks over 50 yards, not a very high percentage for Alabama. So it's not like they were missing chip shots. What they didn't do is they didn't take advantage when they were in scoring position. Could Bama be just a little more aggressive tonight? I think so, but I don't think Les Miles will be. One of the things that Miles relies on with his offense is the fact that his punting unit is number 1 in the nation in net punting. So you play conservatively. You kick the ball away, and if you could pick up 3 or 4 yards on every exchange of punts, you start to slowly win that field position battle. So we're not as afraid of the defensive scores as we ordinarily would be. These offenses just don't give the ball away.
Yeah, but again, the 2 quarterbacks that are going to really, the 3 quarterbacks, who knows Jared Lee gets snaps tonight, but the quarterbacks involved here, A.J. McCarron was pretty green when these two teams met. He's got more under his belt now. And again, we're talking about a guy that averaged more than 8.1 yards per pass attempt throwing the ball downfield. They didn't do a whole lot of that in the first meeting. I expect Bama to do a lot more of that tonight. Similarly, Jordan Jefferson, 8.2 yards per snap. And he brings that run-pass element out of the pocket that is very dangerous, that Alabama didn't see a lot from that this season. So we have a couple of quarterbacks who can make plays downfield. No shortage of offensive playmakers for either one of these 2 ball clubs. And that brings in a question that we got in the comment section of the article on Covers.com about the show today. This one comes from Zali Zalipski, who asked, which individual player will have the biggest impact on tonight's game? Well, how do you answer him, Dave?
We want to think Jordan Jefferson because there is that ability to make a big play with his legs or with his arms. But it's difficult because the propositions out there are tough with Jefferson. What you're looking to do from him is 1 or 2 big plays, not necessarily an accumulation of plays. You look at Trent Richardson because he got the load the first time around. 23 carries for 89 yards, also caught 5 passes for 80 yards. That's pretty good, except the yardage stats were a little bit misleading. He had a 24-yard run and a 39-yard reception. outside of those two big plays, he was shut down on the rest. But if there's one guy who's going to get a load tonight, it is Richardson. More likely, a guy who you can trust with the football. He's not going to fumble it, work the field position game. No surprise if Jefferson makes a couple of big plays. If they've got a couple little tricks put in there for that to happen with his athleticism. But from a prop standpoint, those are difficult plays to make.
Yeah, and from a prop, one prop I'm looking for, I haven't seen it yet. I want to bet sacks under, because I don't know how much that these two teams are going to be passing the football. We saw in the first meeting a lot of running, no question. LSU ran on 41 of their 58 snaps. Alabama, 31 of their 60 snaps. Yeah, protection schemes are good. Both quarterbacks release the ball quickly. If you happen to see a prop on sacks, that's what I'm interested in, taking the under at a reasonable number, total sacks between the two teams.
And he should be taking another under as well.
Nah.
But we'll talk about that tomorrow. Okay, we're conflicted on this one. If you could see some +3 later, obviously put that in your pocket. But here's where we can make some money on tonight's card. We talked about West Virginia, Connecticut a little bit earlier and about those matchup advantages. The West Virginia seniors against a young Connecticut team that, no, you're not going to solve the problems you had at Rutgers on Saturday with just one day off for practice. So play of the daytime, let's take that 5.5 with West Virginia. Possibly the better team than Connecticut right now. So anytime you're getting more than the court with the better team, you have value. But if it's close late, give us those hard-nosed West Virginia veterans against a struggling favorite that's not making their free throws all that well. Back doors open for the Mountaineers. We're not sure they'll need it. Look for them to be alive to win the whole game to the final possessions. Put that 5.5 in your pocket as the Vegas Sports Day play of the day.
And that's going to wrap it up for the Monday edition. Thank you so much for taking time out of your busy day to spend with us. For Malinsky, I'm Savransky. Enjoy the games and good luck. We'll be back again in 23 hours and 15 minutes-ish.